don't forget, recording is progress. Welcome. Thank you for joining. This is the Nervous Nelly Guide to Sewing Chiffon, and you all probably saw on Instagram, I did a Mother the Groom dress earlier in the year, and I understood that, okay, you know, she had a vision of what she wanted, and this I had to kind of just grit my teeth and man up and figure out how best to execute this with the minimum of pain. So this is what I've learned, and so that is what I'm going to share with you, so that that you won't feel the same, because for me it's all about I want something that's repeatable and reliable and as easy as possible, because I'm kind of lazy, and so I don't want to work any harder than I have to. So these techniques I figured out that made this project a pleasure. So I don't know if you all saw the finished photo on Instagram. Did you all?
It was lovely.
Well, I hope she doesn't mind us calling out. Maureen is the mother, the groom. And Maureen, I just have to say, I love the look on your face.
Oh, it turned out like it was beautiful.
It was so gratifying. And actually, I don't know if you all heard the podcast with Susan Calgi and me for Threads magazine. We sort of talked about that, where really, the difference between wearable art and couture. And at the beginning of my career, I had a very smart man say to me, let someone else do the wearable art, steer away from that, because in that particular idea, the garment is the star. But in couture, the person wearing the garment is the star. And every effort needs to be bent towards that person feeling beautiful and comfortable. And it made me so happy to see that, because I thought, she knows she looks good. She knows
it was a very comfortable dress. And I will say the jacket, when I first saw it before you started to make it, Kenneth, I didn't want to wear a jacket. But because of it, I realized I needed to have the jacket. So all along I said to myself, well, at the wedding, I can just take the jacket off.
Yeah.
Frankly, I never took it off because it was so comfortable and it felt like it was part of the dress.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I had the jacket on.
Well, so, the fabric was like air. And just for everyone, it was part of the whole thing. If you didn't see it on Instagram, I was posting different kinds of things. We had to have the lace dyed to match. That was a fun project. The getting the lace on the bodice, that was, I want to say, 3 days of hand sewing. But it was fun. For me, it was like a puzzle. Like, okay, how do we make this whole thing interlock so that there are no seams? And then on the center back, I used the selvage to cover the zipper, because having a zipper, any kind of zipper cut up through the center back of lace, is not something I care to see. I don't think it's a pretty look. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. And so Maureen, now you get to see how it was put together. So
right.
In case you're wondering, the pattern for the class is her jacket. I just had it graded from size 4 on up to whatever. So so you get to make this nice, breezy, easy to wear little jacket. So how the class works, we're gonna get to cutting everything out tonight. So there are 4 videos for tonight. They vary in length. And so what I would encourage you, because what I'm gonna do, if you haven't taken a class before, I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm gonna collapse down the, this window so that you can see. Now, actually, one thing I need to do first is open up these first 4. So you can't see my screen just yet, but I have 4 different oh, there they are. Yay. I have different windows. And so what I would encourage you to do, I'm going to be playing the videos, and I'll be doing a screen share, and I'll collapse down. So I won't be able to see a chat. I won't be able to see a hand up. So if you have a question, turn your mic on and just shout it out. The beauty of this is I can stop the video, we can back up the video. You know, don't be shy, because if you have a question, it stands to reason that someone else might have a question as well. So I think that, asking the question in real time is a much more effective way of going.
Excuse me, Kenneth,
Yes.
will you be sharing the video with this?
Oh yes, because see, okay, so what we've done here, you know, this is like the other ones where I'm recording the entire Zoom class now. And then each of the videos is separate. Those already live on YouTube because I prepared those a little earlier in the summer. So you'll get the YouTube link for the Zoom meeting, and you'll also get the links for the individual videos. So, you know, if you don't want to kind of like scroll through the entire Zoom meeting, you can go directly to the videos themselves. So there are 3 class periods, and so you'll probably get the link sometime tomorrow. You know, probably download it tonight, and so that's how that works, like the other classes I've done. Okay, so other questions? Crickets. Okay, well, first, before we start, this is Magda Orloff-Walensky, mother to the Orloff-Walensky triplets.
Nice.
If you follow me on Instagram, she drove up from South America in her pink Porsche 911 convertible, and she's wearing winter clothes because she was coming up from South America, where I saw they're having blizzards. So she has to get with my assistant and Crazy Bella to get some summer clothes, because she's like weltering under the heat of that big coat. So a new cast member. So okay, so let us begin, shall we? So let us see, share the screen. Okay, and so like I said, you know, if you have questions, don't be shy. Paper, where is it? I know it's here. Let's see if this is it. Oh, there we are. Oh, here we are. Yay. Okay. So let us begin. The chiffon jacket. Now, chiffon fills me with terror. The finishing of the edges, the sewing of the French seams, all of that. But recently I had to make a dress and a jacket. So I had to come up with some details and some techniques to make it not so terrifying. So the details are things like a beautiful roll hem for the cuff and the edges, a very easy way to construct a French seam, and other methods to lay everything out and make it as easy as it can be to work. So this is the class. I call it the Nervous Nelly Guide to Sewing Chiffon, because I am the Nervous Nelly. Now, let's take a look at the actual culprit, the chiffon. This is the chiffon. As you can see, very slippery, very transparent, and what we're going to be working with. So the first thing you need with materials is the chiffon. Here is the pattern printed out. As you can see, this is the jacket front, this is the sleeve, and we have the jacket back. It's in sizes 4 through 20. It's a very lightly fitting jacket. No darts. So here is the pattern, 3 pieces. Also note, no seam allowances. So all of these different colored lines indicate stitching lines. We will be addressing the seam allowances later. So here's our pattern. Next, let's look at materials. First, let's talk about paper. This is adding machine tape, cash register tape. You get this at the office supply. This is what we are going to be using to sew some of the body seams on this jacket. It's just good to have in your sewing kit because it's easily torn. You can control your length. If you need just a little bit, it's right there. So it's inexpensive and worth every penny. Now this is what's called medical examining paper, but it has a crepe finish. Notice it doesn't have any kind of shine. There are two kinds of medical examining paper that you can get. One is somewhat shiny. This, as you can see, is not. I like this better because the fabric then doesn't slip around on it. The fabric stays put. So when you're working with fluid fabrics like the chiffon, paper is going to be your friend. For the edge, we're going to be using pearl cotton. This particular brand, as you can see, is Aunt Lydia's crochet thread, size 10. This is 100% cotton. And as you can see, I have it here in white, just for general use. And if you're lucky enough to be able to find it in the color that matches what you're going to be working with, all the better. So one or the other will do. For marking, we need just some good sharp pencils. Number 2 would be fine. And also, I'm going to be using the disappearing pens. They're by a company called Friction. I will be using the blue because that way it's a little easier on video to differentiate from the pencil marks. But we want to use the Friction pen when we're marking the stitching line for the edge. I'll explain why when we get there. Other additional tools that you will want to have. First off, some really first-rate silk pins. There are some good resources for them. I would recommend the ones that Susan Calgi sells on her website. So good silk pins are a must. And a rotary cutter. And with this, what I would say is do not stint on sharp blades. Start with a fresh blade. If you get a skip, change the blade. The sharp blades are going to make this work much easier. Now, some feet for later. These fall under the category of good to have. This is what's called a number 6 foot, and you can see right there, it has a little hole. This is where we will feed the pearl cotton in for the roll hem. Now, barring this, if you don't have this one, another one that's a good one to have is what's called the open toe embroidery foot. I will demonstrate both of these when we get to that edge, but one or the other is recommended, not absolutely necessary, but the foot that you really want for the roll hem. You've seen this before. I use it a lot. It's the generic 1/4 inch wide adjustable zipper foot. And you will see when I demonstrate that roll edge how easy this makes your work. So as you can see, having the proper equipment is going to make an easy job of this. One more tool that falls in the category of not necessary, but helpful is called the quilting foot. The distance from the edge to the needle is exactly 1/4 inch. These little marks along the edges make it so that you can turn if you're top stitching to do an accurate 1/4 inch. It's usually used for quilting.
Yes, go ahead. Question.
It's Lori. Do you want just a 1/4 inch foot or a scant 1/4 inch?
This one I think is just the 1/4 inch foot. Either
So
one.
not this- Okay,
Yeah. Okay.
thank you.
Sure.
going to be using it when we sew our French seams. So it's not entirely necessary, but a good idea. You can get these for most machines. Now that we have the proper tools and materials, we can get busy. Okay, so questions so far? Yes, Tanya, go ahead.
So my question is regarding, you have the pattern different sizes, so then what size do we go for? And
when I sent the different patterns on the files, there's also one of the files was a sizing chart. So you can look at the sizing chart to determine, you know, by the measurements, what size you need. This is a very loosely fitting jacket. You know, the drape kind of hangs down to the side. So, you know, if you get it kind of roughly in the neighborhood, I think, you know, whatever you choose will work well. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about the crepe, the
medical examining paper.
The medical paper. I have medical paper that it is shiny on one side, but the other side is quite dull.
You know, if you can't get this, you know, I brought this tonight because one of the people asked. If you can't get it, you would use the other and use the dull side.
Okay.
It's just that I really like the tooth that the finish gives it. But, you know, again, you know, if you have something that you can make work, you know, I'm not going to jump up and down and say you have to absolutely use that, because I don't, you know, I mean, that's kind of silly.
Right. Okay. Where did
you know, it used to be that you'd have to buy a whole box of these, but Amazon, because I get it on Amazon, I know, I hate it, but Amazon will sell them in individual rolls now.
Okay.
And so ideally you get the widest roll that you can get, but if you can't get the widest roll, which you're going to see when we do the cutting out, you can tape them together.
Right.
You know, so that you get the adequate width.
Sure.
And it's not terribly expensive.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
go ahead.
Enough that it won't need an FBA.
What?
It's, well, is the pattern there? Well, see, there's no darts on it, because see, really what happens is it just kind of hangs off to the side. So there's really no, there's no allowance for the bust, because, you know, it just kind of drops down from the shoulders.
Oh,
So
maybe it's in my,
I don't think you would need to.
but it's my suitcase is open.
No, you can take, if you're taking.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
The sewing machine feet, with
Yeah.
like, since I don't have a Bernina and I know those are Bernina feet, with like a cording foot work?
You probably, because these feet, the one with the little, actually what I would go with is the open toe embroidery foot. I see that in a generic.
Okay.
And pretty much every machine, you're going to be able to get some version of the quilting foot, because it's such a popular foot.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so other questions? Yes.
Yeah, question on the crochet thread. Video. I got some pearl cotton, but that only comes in 8 and 12.
Okay, you could, you know, I would go with the thicker one.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. You know, the pearl, because the pearl cotton, you know, that I got at my local Daytona trim. And so, see, I didn't really realize that there were that many sizes of pearl cotton. But, you know, you could, and see what I would say, because we're going to be making that roll hem, make a sample, you know, if you have both, make a sample with either and see which one you like.
Okay.
Okay. And so, Luna, you had a question?
Kenneth, that was, sorry, that's the dog's name. I'm not quite sure why Luna's
okay.
KJ.
Hi.
Hey, your 1/4" adjustable foot, that's the one that you sell, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, I really don't understand why Bernina does not make that foot. I do not understand, but they don't. So, okay. So, ready to move on. Yeah, go ahead, ask.
I have a Bernina foot that's very similar to that, and I don't, but I'm going to get it and show it. Just
okay.
But go ahead.
Yeah, because I think I know which foot this is. What I do like about the 1/4 inch wide foot, for those who know me, or even for those who don't, is most zipper feet are engineered so there's that little cutout on either side. Most zipper feet are engineered so that the needle can't get outside the edge of the foot, because
Right.
they're thinking very literally, we're sewing zippers and we don't want the needle to get out here because it's going to break on the teeth. But what I like about the generic is that you can get the needle at the edge or slightly outside the edge, which serves very, very well.
Oh,
And so, you know, if Bernina actually has created a foot that does that, yay. But, you know, the ones that I know that Bernina has created, not the same.
Well,
I got that foot from you not that long ago, and it was the best piping I've put in.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So Diane, Deanne, let's.
This is a 4D Bernina foot, and it looks very similar to what you've got. I think it's a function of how far the needle will go beyond it when it's installed.
Yeah, but you see, my guess is the needle won't get beyond the edge of the foot. That would be.
I
my
understand.
guess. Yeah,
I understand.
And so, you know, if you don't, you know, if you can make it work with that, and for this, you probably could if you could get the needle as close to the edge as you can. But for other kinds of things, I mean, there's so many different things. Like I was teaching in North Carolina last weekend, and we're doing the shawl lapel jacket, which, okay, I'm just gonna throw this out here now because it just came to my mind. Tuesday evenings or Saturdays, shawl lapel jacket.
Tuesdays.
Tuesday.
Tuesdays.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Tuesday.
Okay, that's, you know.
Feel it time.
Well, if it's going to be Tuesdays, it's going to be this time here, you know, in the evening. So yeah. Okay. Well, that answers the question because, you know, I had to come up with a class for North Carolina. And so I just did it video and I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to introduce in the fall. And so on a shawl lapel, there's that weird little corner. And so there is this particular zipper foot makes it so that corner, instead of kind of rounding out at the intersection, it makes a nice corner.
And
that's one of the many reasons. Yeah.
Did you slip in there that you sell that foot that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Good to know.
It's $55 with shipping in the United States. You would want to let me know, let me know which Bernina it is, because there are two different adapters, because the adapter for the new machines is I have to go in and grind out some of the adapter so that the slide of the foot won't hit on the adapter. And that's because, see, this is something that Bernina doesn't want to mess with. So I do it. So it's, you know, if you're interested, you can email me and we can talk about how to make that happen. So
okay. I have a question. Are you familiar with the Janome feet?
Not really.
Oh, because Janome has a foot, and I don't think you can see it, but you can actually use this side.
Okay.
So you can set it as close to the zip. You can do what you can do with that little foot, but you have a bigger foot on your either your left or your right.
So, you know, I think if you can make it work.
Yeah.
You know, but over my career, you know, anyone who knows me, I have used that damn foot for 30 years. And there are other things I use it for, like a piped pocket and buttonhole. It is exactly the size, so the piped pockets and buttonholes turn out exactly perfectly. So it's, you know, it's just one of those things. Faye, you had to get it?
Yeah, Diane, your foot has a computer chip on top of it, the one that you just showed.
Yeah,
yes. So you know, because I used to work at a store who sold Bernina's, Brothers, and Janomes, and I have a brother machine. So, but your foot, it should go a little bit closer to the edge. You know, your needle, you should be able to position your needle a little bit closer to the edge.
Okay.
But, yeah, but practice first.
Oh yeah.
You have the computer. Yeah, you have the computer chip, so you should be able to go a little bit closer to the edge.
Okay.
But with Kenna's foot, you will be able to get really right up onto it because there's not a wide foot.
Got to begin with.
To begin with, yeah. But see, I have the brother machine, and it's like I have the narrow foot. It's not adjustable like his is, but I can put it from either side to the other side, so I can still get close to it too.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so Laura, you had a question.
Well, as far as the Janome, I have one of your feet I bought for my Janome, and it works brilliantly. Like I have a mechanical and I have a computerized. They're both, the computerized is like 20 years old, but it works really well with it. You just have to, and I got it from you, but you have to get you didn't jury rig it for the Bernina, you just sold me a regular one kind of thing.
Okay.
Will that work on the 301?
You mean the Singer 301A?
Yeah.
You have to get a slant needle for that. Because it's a slant needle machine, the 301A. So you would have to have, and I don't have any of those.
Okay.
That's one of those you would just kind of go on eBay and see if you can find one that's a
okay.
slant needle.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, so now everyone knows everything about that particular foot. Any other before we? Oh yes, go ahead, Lexi.
Actually, I have a FOF performance. Do I need any special foot for the FOF? I noticed nobody was representing FOF here.
Well, I think
I have that machine, and I went online and bought a generic foot for it. And it has the little screw like Mr. King showed. I don't remember the website, but I Googled it first and it came up. I'm gonna show it to you. Let me go get it. And
Did it work?
It was $20 something, $30 tops.
Okay.
I'm gonna show it to you, and you can get it for your FOF because that's the one I have. Hold on, let me go get it. One second.
It's okay. It's okay. I talked to my dealer and I think that's the same one. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, so
Thanks.
Can I ask one last question?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have the Bernina 570. Now, to get that foot attached, you would have to do some adjustment, correct?
But I do all of that.
But I also have a Bernina 1008.
It's the same.
So it would work on that one, no problem.
Well, the 1008, it's a different adapter.
Oh, so what would be easier?
Well, what I can do is I can sell you both adapters in one foot, because if you adjust it for one, it falls for the other.
And it has the little screw that you can position the needle. See and I already tried it on my FOF and it works, and it's Teflon, so it even works for pleather. So I can get more uses out of it. So yeah.
So here we are.
Thank you.
A dissertation on the little zipper foot. So, okay, so next we're going to be marking and let's see, copying out the pieces. So let's see, can we see it? Oh, there we are. So yeah, so what we're doing next is we're going to be using the paper. So as before, give me a shout out if you have a question. So let us continue.
We will not be using the pattern itself to cut our fabric. What we will do is trace the fabric onto the exam paper. This is all going to be cut single layer. So we will make 2 sleeves, one left, one right. We will also make 2 fronts, a left and a right, and 1 complete back. But we want to trace the information onto the medical examining paper before we proceed. Here I have both copies traced out, as you can see, directional arrow to the front, directional arrow to the front. I have also added seam allowances. So you can see here, call them out. So all the side seams, the armhole, 5/8 of an inch, and the hem allowance is 1 1/4. The hem allowance is 1 1/4 because we need a little extra for the finishing that we're going to be doing on the sleeves as well as.
Yes.
Yeah, was there a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Somebody isn't muted.
Yeah.
So here I have the entire sleeve marked out, and I'm going to talk about which gets the friction pen, which gets the pencil. All of seam allowance lines get the pencil. All of these stitching lines get the pencil. But this here, zoom in here, this line here gets the friction pen. You're probably wondering why that is. And so I have a little video prepared to explain why this is different than the other. A little tip When you're stay stitching through a marked line on paper, you can see on the left, I have marked paper with a pencil, and on the right, I've marked it with a friction pen. There's a reason for this, and I will show you the results in just a moment. First, I will sew the pencil. Stitch, so I just know that. So next, we will sew the friction pen. Now we sew the friction pen again on the same. Here, we will go over to the pressing table. Our next step here is to tear away the paper. Easiest way really is to fold on the stitching line and crease the paper, and then separate it like so. Now the thing to know when you're sewing through paper is the shorter the stitch, the easier it is to remove up to a certain point. This is a 2.5 stitch. So it makes it relatively easy to remove. You're going to get a little bit that wants to take hold. But for the most part, you're all good. I'm going to bring the camera in and we can get a closer look. Whoa. These two stitching lines, as you can see, are the stitching lines from earlier. I actually sewed through the paper and I'm laying it on another layer of the fabric so you can see. But notice, see how that is darker? That is the line that I drew in pencil, whereas this is the line I drew with the friction pen. So as it comes out of the machine, it looks pretty clean, but I gave it a press here. So see the difference between one and the other. This is just a little tip to know. Actually, I decided to show you this little trick for copying off the fronts before I copy off the fronts. As you can see here, the paper is not nearly wide enough to cover the pattern. So what I will do here is come in and tape in some extra. Now, don't be shy about the tape. Use as much tape as you feel necessary to make this stable. I try not to run the tape.
Go ahead.
Is a friction pen like a Pilot FRIXON pen, the erasable pen? Is that what you're using?
It's a friction pen. Let's see, it's a heat erasable. So what you're going to do, you know, it's it's Pilot. Pilot is the brand. Okay. And you just, you know, you just run a little, you run the iron over it, the ink disappears. And that's why I, you know, did that little kind of side-by-side demonstration, because I learned what, you know, on this dress, this is one of the things I learned is that if you sew through a pencil line, you're going to get a little bit of a shadow on that stitching, which is not desirable.
Right.
Okay.
Do you use steam? What?
No, you can just you don't have to use steam. You just run the iron over it, because what you'll see when we get into the construction is I really didn't use steam on the chiffon. I used a dry iron on most of it.
Kenneth?
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Why don't you mark all of them with the friction then?
It's easier. You know, because there's some that, you know, there's certain parts that you don't really have to worry about, like the actual stitching lines on the body. You're going to see later that when I sew the French seam, I'm going to go in and I'm going to mark the first stitching line again in friction pen so that you're not sewing through graphite. So really the only time that you would have to worry about sewing through graphite is finishing the edges of your jacket.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
Yes, I have a question, and that is, do you ever use, oh God, my brain is not working, a glue stick instead of tape?
No, absolutely
Okay.
not. No, not for this. Because see, what I'm doing here is I'm just taping the two pieces of paper together.
Okay.
And if you would use a glue stick, then you'd have to wait for it to dry. And then there is that likely, you know, because see, I assume that if something could happen, it's going to happen. And so, you know, it could be that, because see, we're going to lay these pieces down onto the chiffon to cut. And if you have a bit of glue that hasn't like completely dried and left a stain on your chiffon, then you've got to deal with that particular issue. And so, yeah, you know, I'm not a big fan of glue stick. Other people do for certain things, and I understand it if you're going to be washing the garment. But for something like this, where you just want to be as careful as possible, I wouldn't.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So other questions?
Yes, Kenneth, quick question. For the other video you just showed, was that the adding machine tape or was that the Crate Medical?
That was the adding machine tape, but it works on any paper.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So like on this one, you're going to see it. You know, this whole edge all along here, that's going to be your roll hem. So that's going to be marked with the friction pen. You know, the seam allowance itself is going to be marked in pencil because you're going to cut that off when you cut the fabric out.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So other questions?
I put this in chat, but basically we're foundation paper piecing, essentially, right? With the chiffon and the crepe paper.
What was that again?
We're foundation paper piecing with the chiffon and the crepe paper.
Yeah, that sounds like a quilting term. I don't know if is that a quilting term?
Yeah, it's where you put the paper behind before you sew.
Well, yeah, we're going to be putting the paper on top of the fabric before we sew it.
Okay.
Yeah, I know I showed sewing through the chiffon with the paper underneath, but on this, where we're going with this is we're going to be laying this down. We're going to cut everything single layer. We're going to have the fabric face up on the table, and we're going to thread baste everything down. And so the paper is going to be on top. And the advantage of that, you know, is getting ahead of ourselves, but that's okay. That's the question. What I liked about that is, especially with French seams, I get confused as to, you know, do we start with wrong sides, right sides? So you know that the paper side is going to be the right side of the fabric.
And in paper piecing, you normally put more fabric. You sew with the fabric on the bottom and you sew with the paper on top. And you kind of are hoping that you have enough fabric to get caught in the seam allowances.
Yeah.
And you usually end up cutting the excess off. Whereas this, you're not cutting any excess. You're using exactly what you need.
This isn't really, we're not really paper piecing on this.
No, we're not.
We're just using the paper, you know, we're getting the information from the pattern itself onto the paper. The paper then is going onto the fabric and being basted down. And then we're going to use the paper as the cutting guide as well. And the paper is going to kind of travel with the fabric for a great part of the journey of going into being turned into a jacket.
Kenneth?
Yes.
What's the seam allowance or hem allowance on the rolled hem edges?
It's 1 1/4 inches.
1 1/4 inches? Okay.
Yeah, and all the other seam allowances are standard 5/8. Or if you want to use a different seam allowance, you could do that as well. But I like 1 1/4 inches for the roll hem. And when you see, because that's going to be a big old long video next time, you'll see why I need that 1 1/4 inches. Okay, so moving right along.
Over a stitching line, because I just don't want to run the risk of any of the adhesive on the tape getting in the stitches, but you can get the tape really right up to the stitching line. And then you trim off what you don't need. And there you have it. So here, I'm ready to copy. So I will go off camera and do that and bring it back. here I have one of the fronts copied, and I have used pencil on the side seam, the armhole seam, and the shoulder. Then I changed to friction pen because all of this particular seam line is going to be the roll edge that we're going to be sewing later. So using the friction pen is going to keep it so that I don't get graphite in the stitches. So I'm going to zoom in over in the corner here. So what you can see here, the side seam, the armhole, and the shoulder are 5/8 of an inch. And anything with the friction pen, that is 1 1/4 inch. Hem allowance, otherwise 5/8. So to repeat, zoom out a little bit. The shoulder, the armhole, side seam get a 5/8 inch, and all of this line here gets 1 1/4 inch. So I will make a mirror image of this. I've prepared the paper by overlapping, I'd say about 1 1.5 inches. And as you can see, I've drawn a line representing the center back. So this makes it very easy for me to bring this in, line up center back line on the paper with the center back line on the pattern. So my first step, which I will do off camera, is copy off 1/2, and I will bring that back and show you the result. So what I've done here is I used the friction pen at the neck seam because that's going to be a roll hem. Added 1 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then on shoulder seam and on the armhole seam and on the side seam, I marked it in pencil and gave a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So then looking at the hem, I marked that also with the friction pen. And I gave the hem the 1 1/4 inch seam allowance for finishing. So now really what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the paper over and repeat what I did so I can get the mirror image. So I will bring back that result later. So now, as you can see, I have the center back line, have the neck seams marked there, the shoulders, the armholes, my 5/8 of an inch seam allowances down to the hem. Now you notice, again, this is marked with the friction pen because it's going to be a finished edge. You don't want to stitch through the graphite. So then we come back up the other side. 5/8 of an inch. But at the top here, yes, friction pen from there to there because that is the neck finish, 1 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top. Now we have.
When you flipped, which did you flip over? Did you flip your pattern over or did you flip your tissue paper over?
I flipped the paper over.
Which paper?
The tissue.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, one side may kind of read a little more faintly because I turned the tissue over or turned the medical exam paper over, but that's really the easiest way to do it.
It is. Thank you.
Okay.
Our pattern pieces prepared for laying out onto the fabric.
Okay, so now questions about all of this. You know, this may seem to be a little bit fiddly and a little bit obsessive, you know, as far as marking and all of that. But honestly, you know, this is something I talk to my students at FIT about. Like, don't stint on marking. Don't stint on preparation. Do whatever you can at the beginning, even though it seems boring, because if you have it all sort of really set in place at the beginning, you're not going to have to guess later, and you're going to get something that's going to look you're going to have a better result.
Kenneth, the best advice I've ever had from you in a class was to mark everything as though you were going to have amnesia 5 minutes later.
Yes.
Because we might.
It's happened.
Yes,
You come in,
no,
wait a minute, what was this?
Oh yes, oh yes, I'm kind of going through one of those. Yeah, I got a look at myself in video the other day, and it was like, damn, I look old, but you know, oh well. But you know, I actually recently, one of my Park Avenue gals and I had lunch, and it's so funny because, you know, that particular crowd, you know, after lunch we were standing out in front of the restaurant in the daylight, and I didn't have my sunglasses on, and it's a little thing they do, and they kind of sidle up to you and kind of look, and what they're looking at is all of this, and I just turned it, I looked at her, and I said, looks pretty good, doesn't it? She said, do you use Botox? I said, no, I just use very expensive eye cream. And then when I told her how much it was, she's like, oh my God. I'm like, hey, there's no surgical intervention here. So I'll use good eye cream. So yeah, we do what we can.
Are you going to put that in the chat?
Yeah, right.
What the cream is?
Yeah, we want to know.
Okay, well, I'm just going to warn you, you know, like it's called medical.
You know, Kenneth, these classes are not exactly the cheapest things in town either. So, you know, we can handle.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you, it's $700 a jar.
Oh, no problem.
Not just to
How long does it last?
You can make a jar last 10 months.
Yeah, so that's a yearly investment. That's not so
You have
bad.
to use a lot of it. But yeah, it was, you know, when I first started using it, a friend of mine gave it to me for Christmas one time. And I remember thinking, how different can it be from what I was using? And then after about a month, I had 2 people in 1 week ask me if I'd had work done. And that's when I said, I'm sticking with that. So yeah, so there you go. Yeah. Okay, so now other questions?
You still didn't tell us the brand.
Yeah, I typed it in the
oh, it's not coming up on mine.
No.
Medical beauty research.
If we use the friction pen for both
Just
lines,
medical beauty research.
Okay, well, I can Google that.
It's from Germany, and this is the friction pen.
yeah, if we use it for both lines, is that problematic? We should do one in pencil and one in friction.
But you see, the challenge is if you're using it for everything is that if you hit something with heat before you are done with the marks, you kind of lose all the marks. So I use it where I don't want to get it in the stitches, but everything else, I like to have the pencil because I like the marks there until I get rid of them. And how you get rid of all those marks really is you tear the paper away. Okay?
Kenneth, silly question though, but with the pens, I know cold brings the lines back. Have you ever experienced anything like that? That's what they say.
Well, you know, it's like, I'm sure it probably does, but okay, with this particular roll hem, that stay stitch is going to be encased inside of the roll hem, so it's really no problem.
Got it.
So I don't worry about things like that because, you know, if you're going to be wearing a little tiny chiffon jacket like this in the cold weather,
you're on your own.
Well, you're going to be awfully cold, you know, and I think your problems are going to be a little more about hypothermia or something than, oh, the marks on from my pen are showing. So, you know,
I guess it's not so much wearing it, but like if you were like, if you were doing it and you either had like in the winter or something, I mean, I guess like kind of like that, not so much that, you know, where you're wearing the jacket from. I guess if you're marking, I don't know. I guess that was just a quick question. I know it was kind of silly.
I don't worry about things like that. No.
All right.
Because see, generally I try not to mark the face of the fabric with it at all.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's where I'm thinking more of.
Yeah, because I found in certain fabrics, it will leave a trace. Like organza, it will leave a mark. You can see very clearly because the you know, the color has disappeared, but the actual ink is still on the organza, so you can see it very clearly.
Maybe that's where I'm trying to get at. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So now, one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. It sounds like we're only going to be using this pattern once.
Yeah.
As we're sewing
you
on
use
it.
the
And
pattern anytime you want, but you copy off onto fresh paper. That copy on the fresh paper is what you're going to eventually destroy in the process.
okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
And so that's why, you know, I have you copy it off so that, you know, the pattern you can use as many
Right.
times.
Okay. I meant the paper. Yeah.
Yeah, the
sewing.
paper is going to be gone. That's just that you consume that in the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So for muslins, does it make sense to do a tissue muslin with just paper?
I would use a muslin. You know, see, I'm not good with tissue fitting patterns. I read about that, and some people have success with it. I'm not one of them. You know, fabric is fabric. Fabric behaves like fabric. You can use a real cheapo chiffon, or you could use a cheapo whatever to make the muslin, but I would use an actual woven fabric to make the muslin rather than tissue.
I got a question, and I had emailed you, and it's the same thing.
Oh, okay. What's the question?
My question was, if I was making this out of something more substantial like muslin, I would make that back adjustment.
I would.
Where it's just a little, because this is chiffon, and I didn't take that into consideration because I've never sewn with something like this.
Yeah.
Isn't it just going to drape and I'll just ignore it anyway?
So what you could do is you could actually kind of, you know, do the adjustment and then, you know, maybe give yourself a little extra width as well across the back, but then just get rid of the seam.
Okay, because all I'm really needing is a wedge out of part of it. And I'm like, the way he placed the paper, I might be able to just place it out.
You know, and you could, you know, because if, you know, to cover, you know, your shoulder seam is going to come up a little bit, but since it's drapey,
it's okay. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. It was just, if it was in woven, even I was in your class at FIT, you'd be like, you're fixing that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay.
Okay. So last video for the day. So this is, we're laying it out and cutting. So here we are. And so as before, you know, if you have questions, don't be shy.
When cutting out chiffon, it's really a good idea, I find, to break up the fabric into different sections. I'm going to be laying out and setting up the sleeves. I will do the rest off camera. But as you can see, I'm using a gridded cutting mat. I have some weights over here. So I have lined up the selvage here. And I want to line up the fabric along a crosswise line. You really want to cut your fabric square, as you know. And so one way of getting this to where you want it to is to breathe on it. So once you have everything all squared up, I can then now place the paper onto the fabric. So I'm going to do each one separately. Now, the center line here is the straight of grain, and you can cut a little more efficiently if you wish, but I just assume that I'm going to be wasting some fabric. Okay, this looks like it's wobbled a little bit, so let's make sure that selvage is straight. And what I like to do here, as usual, I want to make sure that everything is square with the grain. There. Okay. So there's that. A couple weights there. The other one goes here. And as well, we want to make sure everything is square. So using silk pins because you want silk pins. You can pin all of this okay. So now I have pinned all the way around the perimeter, as you can see, both of these. Now you can see here, there's some orange thread. What I'm going to do next is sew a thread baste to baste these all the way around. So I will start at the bottom, and you want to sew this in the seam allowance. Obviously, you don't want to risk leaving any holes in the actual fabric. Normally, I would use white, but since this is a demonstration, I'm using this bright orange so you can get a sense of what I'm doing here. And I like basting all the way around. It controls everything. Also, when you are working with this, the assumption then is that the paper side up is the right side of the fabric. So it's just, it makes it easy for me, because otherwise with a fabric like this, I will get confused as to which is the right and the wrong side because they both look the same. So now I'm going to baste all the way around, and I will come back and show you the result. We're coming into the home stretch. I have basted around both of these sleeves. Now this may seem a little tedious, but what I'd like to say here is that the setup is going to make your life easier in the construction. If you stint on basting and marking at this point, it's going to make your life much more difficult later. So just put on some good music and accept that this is going to take as long as it takes. So now coming into the home stretch here. So you can see I've gone all the way around. Let me just secure this thread. There we are. Okay, now let's have a look at the results. Sorry. As you can see, I have basted around both of these. And next, we're going to be cutting. This is where you want your rotary cutter with a fresh blade. Do not stint on blades. And you just cut through everything. You cut through the paper and the fabric all in one operation. The rotary cutter is far more efficient than trying to cut this with scissors. You're going to get a good, clean, straight cut. And you notice I'm not moving the fabric itself. I'm shifting around the table to make sure that everything gets cut properly. So there we are. Lift this off gently. And as you're cutting, just fold it up, set it aside. I will cut out the other one and return with the results.
Excuse me, Kenneth.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
You showed where you said you cut the fabric so that you would have a straight of the grain.
Yes.
Okay. Well, could you rip it?
Well, yeah, actually, if I'm going to roll this back.
It looked like it was ripped.
Yeah,
and
you
not
can
really
see,
cut.
You can see right there. That's the torn edge.
Yes.
So that's
okay.
on the cross grain. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let's up. There we are. Back up here. Okay.
So now we have both pieces cut. not going to make you watch me cut the other pieces. It would be like watching water torture. So I will be back with all of the pieces cut. And here we have all of our pieces cut, ready for construction. So you can see here we have the back panel, we have the two sleeves here, and we have the two fronts. Everything is basted in place, ready for construction. On the front pieces.
Yeah, question?
Yeah, I have a question. When we emailed earlier on, I said that my fabric is not quite as wide as what you called for, but I had the length necessary. And you wrote back, as long as it's not a directional print, and it's a print, and it's not directional, that I would be able to interleaf the pieces. And I understand all that. The question I have is, if I'm getting a little nervous, because if I need, or it's recommended that I'll say tear off chunks for the sleeves and for the front and the back, there is necessarily, I imagine, some waste involved, more than if you cut it out in a single piece. And I'm hoping I have enough fabric.
Well, you know what I would ask you is, do you have a large table?
I have a floor and I'm very good at scampering around it.
Okay, well, you see, as you notice, see this here, I know that's, you know, this is my table.
Yeah.
Actually, I will confess that when I cut out Maureen's dress and her jacket, I went to FIT. I have a magic key. I'm sworn to secrecy as to where I got it, so that I can basically get into any room I want. And they have very large tables there. And what I did was I squared up the entire length of fabric on one of the tables. So I didn't tear it into pieces.
Okay.
So if you can get it, lay it out, and make sure everything is square, you're going to be fine.
Okay, so I could put my mats down on the floor and square it up to that and work from there, and maybe not rip it into sleeve and front.
Right, absolutely.
And back.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
It sounds like an athletic event.
Yeah, it is, but okay, yeah. So I heard a question.
I have a question, Kenneth. This is Dory.
Yeah.
So are the sleeves cut on the cross grain then?
Well, no, the sleeves are cut lengthwise grain. So in the let me just run this back. You know, when we were cutting the sleeves, you can see here, there's the selvage.
Oh, okay, I see. All right, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so other questions? Okay, so moving right along.
And it's Maureen, I have a question.
Yeah.
The thread that you used for basting, what kind of thread was that?
That's just a regular old polyester. You know,
Okay.
any kind of thread you have in your workspace will work just fine. You know, I used a bright orange just so we could see it for demonstration purposes, but if you have just some regular old white thread, you're fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And did you use a specific size needle for the basting?
Not really, because you're basting everything in the seam allowance. So you don't really have to worry so much about leaving needle holes in the fabric.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, moving right along.
Is cut, ready for construction. So you can see here we have the back panel, we have the two sleeves here, and we have the two fronts. Everything is basted in place, ready for construction. On the front pieces, we're going to stay stitch all along this edge here. That will be the finished edge of the fronts. The stay stitching on the sleeves is along this line on the hem. The stay stitching on the back is the neck seam and along the hem. One thing that is helpful for sewing sheer fabrics is what's called the single needle throat plate. So as you can see here, there is, instead of a long oval hole to accommodate a zigzag, this is just a single hole. So you can only sew with the straight stitch on this machine. Now you notice here, I have made this very obvious sign because otherwise I'll forget. And if you forget and put a zigzag on your machine, you're going to break a needle. So this is a helpful tool to work with when you're sewing with shears. This last step before we begin construction is to come in and stay stitch over the ink from the friction pen. Now the stay stitch I'm going to be sewing with is like a 1.5. You want it a little bit shorter. Shorter stitches are easier to tear the paper away from later. And there's one. And just to make everything easier, you can feed these two in at the same time. Little time saving thing here.
Kenneth?
Yes.
What needle are you using?
Excuse me?
What needle are you using?
I like a fine, like a 10 or an 8.
Okay.
Now,
A
some,
micro or?
some people like a microtex needle for this.
Okay.
But I found that like just this, because see, I buy certain kinds of the universal needles by the 100 pack. And so I think this is the 8.
Okay. So it would be an 8, it would be an 812. Is that how that goes?
Well, it's like something 8. You know, the last number on the, well, actually, let me go get the box. I'll be right back.
This is 68, Kenneth.
Yeah, it's a 68. That's, yeah, thank you.
A 60/8?
Yes. Or you could use a 70/10 or whatever that is, but you want a fine needle because it's good to sew with fine thread as well.
But Kenneth, it's not, you just said it's a normal universal needle, but a size 68, but not like a specialty one, as you just said, not a microtext or anything like that.
No, now my friend Linda Maynard swears by the microtext needles for this. So if you have them, I'd say absolutely use them. But I got good results sewing with just the standard universal needle on this.
Okay, great.
So other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What weight of thread would you use?
You know, I just use the standard Gutermann 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about something like a 100 weight silk thread?
You could use that too. I don't, you see, I tend not to like to use silk thread in the machine. For my sewing things, first off, it's expensive. Secondly, I just, you know, it feels weird. I really like working with just a Gutermann polyester. I just find that works really well for what I do.
Is it 100% polyester?
Yes. Yeah. Now you could, some people, and I've done this myself in the past, you could use a fine rayon machine embroidery thread and a 60/8 needle as well. You know, the operative thing here, I think, to think about is fine needle, fine thread will give you a fine result.
But the poly is fine enough. That's interesting.
Yeah, I had very good luck with it. I was very happy with how it all turned out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the basting, did you use a smaller needle size or a different weight basting thread because of the chiffon, or you're not worried because it's in the seam allowance?
I didn't really worry because it's in the seam allowance. Now, if I were going to be basting something where I was worried, you know, if it was going to be in the body of the garment and I was worried about leaving marks, I would use a fine rayon machine embroidery thread, and I would use a number 10 beading needle.
Ooh. And then my second question, I have a straight stitch Juki machine. So would you say it's better to use that for the chiffon project than to use my standard dual machine?
Well, you know, for this, if you have a single needle throat plate for your general purpose machine, I would recommend that. because there are some things I'm going to be doing here that are going to require, that you need the other plate on this machine. But, or you could, if you have two machines, why not use both?
Okay.
But the single needle plate is not something I use often. And that's why I have this kind of hokey little big sign on there, because otherwise, I forget it's on there and then I end up breaking needles.
Yeah, I broke enough needles. I just got a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so other questions?
Yes, I had one, Kenneth. Sorry, just a quick one. Could you recap, please, the advantages of the single needle throat plate? I just missed that when you went through it.
Well, this is one of those things. If you have the regular throat plate where it has the oval opening that accommodates a zigzag, there is some likelihood. Now, if you have the paper and everything, the likelihood is small, but I like to minimize the any possible ways this could go south. If it's having the single needle throat plate on, you're less likely for the needle to stuff the fabric down into the machine. The long oval hole, there are times, and and it happens when you least expect it, where the needle will actually stuff the fabric down into the hole, and it's usually at a place where you can't hide it.
It's a nightmare. It's its own nightmare.
Yeah. And so, it's one of those things. This is on the list of things that it's just good to have on your machine. You don't use it much, but it's just good to have. Did that help?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So moving right along.
And sew some more on the other pieces. On the back, we want to stay stitch the neck edge as well as the hem. That.
Oh.
Now we sew the bottom.
I do have a question at the end of this.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question is, I've always been taught to directionally stay stitch a curved like neck edge. So if going into the the back neck seam, I would have been taught to take it from the shoulder seam to the center and then from the other shoulder seam to the center. I believe here you went from shoulder towards it past the center and to the other shoulder.
That's correct, because everything is attached to paper.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
So, and the directional sewing, I get why they do it, but I don't see that it makes that much of a difference, because if you have something that's a little bit stretchy or otherwise might warp or distort, I would sew that through paper as well. So that's why I don't really deal that much with directional sewing.
Got it.
Okay.
Good to know. That's interesting. Thanks.
Question, Kenneth.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a reason why you would not, like chiffon being so thin and transparent, and in this case, of course, because there's no print on it, is there any reason why you would not sew with the paper under, since you would see through your chiffon?
Well, I like having it on top, just for layout purposes, if for nothing else, because we have the fabric on the table, we have it all squared up, we put the paper on top, we baste everything down so nothing shifts. That is really why I like the paper on top. And that's why and the other advantage of that is that then I know that paper being on top, that is the right side of the fabric. So when we get to the French seams, I know that the wrong sides go together first, and I don't have to I don't have to puzzle around with which side is which. So for me, other people have the fabric on top and the paper underneath. I like it better this way.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Kenneth, quick question. So when you get the chiffon off the bowl, is there a true wrong side or right side, or you just pick one and then just go with it?
You pick one and go with it because they're both kind of the same. And
Perfect.
so, the thing is you pick one, you go with it. And I like to cut with a nap layout rather than a nested layout.
Yeah.
Because you run the risk, ever so slight because especially if you're cutting a satin or charmeuse, this is just something to know. There is a nap. If you do a nested layout, the colors, the sheen is going to affect the color ever so slightly, and you could get a garment that looks like two different colors.
Got it.
So
Okay.
I just stick with that for any of these kinds of fabrics.
Also, Kenneth, would you suggest, I come from the school of you wash everything before you sew it?
No, because see, this is not going to be washed.
No.
Okay.
This is an evening garment.
Okay.
If when she decides she needs to have it
Dry clean it.
she would send it to the dry cleaner. So yeah.
Okay. Thank
Okay. Okay. So other questions? Okay. So let us finish up.
The hem on the back piece. And next will be the fronts. So I have one of the fronts sewn. The other one, and meet you back at the work table. So here we have all of the stay stitching sewn, the front edges of both fronts, the cuffs of the sleeves, the hem on the back, as well as the neck on the back. So all of the fabric pieces are now prepared, and now we can begin construction.
And so there we are. Hang on one moment, please. So those are the lessons for tonight. So questions, comments, thoughts, hopes, fears, dreams, desires.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Faye.
Okay. I have like a little dot on my chiffon.
Okay.
Okay. I also bought solid black chiffon.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, should I at any time consider making two and like using the black as a lining?
That would be a nosebleed.
Okay.
That would be a real nosebleed. I mean,
don't need
that
that.
just made my brain freeze just thinking about doing that. I
Okay,
mean, if,
never
if
mind.
you're brave enough that you want to do that, I would say mazel tov, but
No, I don't think I could drink enough mimosas then.
well,
for
no,
that
but
one.
you see, yeah, because see, there are certain things that and
How many Mai Tais does this take?
well, you see, I don't drink alcohol, so it would be I would have to dangle a very big carrot in front of my nose, and that would be like a very big check. Because there are certain things like sewing with white fabric. Yeah, I've done it, but it's a big whopping expense to do because you control demand by price. And so that particular idea of lining a chiffon with another chiffon, I just makes my head hurt thinking about it.
Okay, well, I don't want to give you a headache. Thank you.
So there was another question.
Yeah, Kenneth, this is Nina. So
Hi.
Yeah. So along the lines of things that give you headaches. So the fabric that I have is some fabric I bought, I think in Stockholm, but it's from Italy. And it's really, it's a really lovely Ultimoda chiffon. It's just gorgeous. And what I wanted to do was this top.
Okay.
It has no darts, it's got no darts. It's just straight front and back, but it has buttons down the back.
Okay.
So how would you do buttons in chiffon down the back?
You know, if I were, you know, because with the edge that I'm going to show you,
Yeah.
what I would do is I would do French tacks and like buttons and loops.
Oh.
I wouldn't try to do a placket. I wouldn't try to, I mean, I would, you know, because that edge that we're going to be making is solid enough that it could support French tacks, you know, for buttons and loops kind of thing.
Okay.
When you say French tacks, what do you mean?
Okay, a French tack. Okay, how can I explain? Oh, here, I just happen to have a jacket. Because I'm going to be teaching this jacket, the half line jacket, in the fall. And I know, here's one. If I can get it close enough for everyone to see. Does that read? Everyone?
Not very well to me.
Okay, well, it's a little bar tack, and then it's covered with buttonhole stitch.
Okay.
And so
that ends up being the loop you're constructing. I get it.
Yeah, you see,
Yeah.
I use it on this jacket. I use it to anchor all of the facing pieces so that they don't flap around. But I use it also for the eye in a hook and eye.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like buttons and loops. It's a really pretty treatment. And I think that, you know, if you did that with a really beautiful silk buttonhole thread, that would be really pretty. And then, you know, get little teeny cover buttons or maybe pearl buttons to go with it. That would be yummy.
Gotcha.
Okay, other questions?
Kenneth, to pick out the pattern to start with, would you just go with your bust size and then just start from there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like I said, this is a very lightly fitting jacket. There's no darts in it. It kind of drops from the shoulder straight down. So, you know, any kind of full bust adjustment or any kind of thing like that, not really something you have to worry about.
But if maybe it was maybe a round back, because I know in the raglan sleeve, you told me to adjust the round back a little bit. Would that be something that might be for this pattern too?
Yeah, actually, I think because Michelle was talking, she has a similar thing where there's a curve in the back. And so you would make that adjustment where you kind of bring it up at the center back to give you a little extra. But you could either, if you really wanted to, have a seam down the center, or because this is such a drapey kind of jacket, you could just, you know, bring the shoulders up and maybe give yourself a little extra width on that back, but still try to cut it on the fold.
I was going to put it on muslin first, then see where I go with that, because I'm trying to visualize what you're talking about, but thank you.
Yeah, but what I would say as far as a test garment, instead of muslin, try it. If you have something that's kind of drapey and fluid that, you know, you don't care about, that you can make a sample out of, that might be a good, you know, a good test to see if you really do need to have that center back seam or if you can get away without it.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
I absolutely love the way the basting stitch stabilized the chiffon, because usually, like when you're searching how to cut chiffon, they just tell you about the paper and to cut it with the rotary cutter, but they don't show that part. And when you try that, it's moving all around going crazy.
Well, you know, because
when I saw that, I was like, man, I absolutely love this and I can't wait to go try it.
Well, good. You know, because I'm lazy and I don't want to have to fight anything. I want it to stay together so that, you know, and pins don't, you know, like dealing with the pins. No, you know, that's disaster waiting to happen.
That's genius. I love it. It's
Thank you.
awesome.
I heard another question.
Yeah, I had a question on a note of the previous question.
Yeah.
I have very prominent shoulder blades. So when I did my muslin, I always have to have shoulder darts.
Okay.
So I just go ahead and do the technique like you said, and that'd be fine.
Yeah, and actually next week, someone emailed me to give me a kind of remind me, but I have a video on how to sew with the bobbin thread.
Okay. Okay.
And, you know, for any kind of transparent fabric, you know, instead of starting at the wide end and working to the point, you start at the point and work backwards. And sewing with the bobbin thread makes it so you don't have those two little whiskers hanging out and looking kind of sloppy.
Okay.
Okay.
I will email you.
Okay. So other questions? Well, I think then our class is over. Let me turn off the recording. Stop recording.